Welcome to Just Fruits Make Your Own Apple Cider Vinegar Workshop. In this video, we'll demonstrate how to make homemade small batch vinegar from apple scraps. We'll also include a little tutorial on how to make a simple and easy apple butter. Check out the video description to jump to the vinegar making process or the apple butter recipe. Making apple cider vinegar is as simple as can be, but it does require some time. All in all, it typically takes about a month before I start using my homemade vinegar in recipes. Don't worry though, it's a very passive process, relying on microorganisms to do the work. The recipe we're demonstrating is for small batch. Feel free to multiply it folk method style to make a larger apple cider vinegar batch. To make your own apple cider vinegar, you need just a few ingredients. Apple cores and skins, around 5 or 6 apples, which you can also save, put in a bag in your freezer, and use over time. Sugar and water. You don't need much in terms of supplies either. We're going to have a clean mason jar, quart size, 5 to 6 apples, the peels and cores of those, but we're going to save the flesh if you want to make apple butter. Then a paring knife or a vegetable peeler, a wooden spoon to help you push things down, and then some kind of knife and cutting board. You'll also need cheesecloth, or if you don't have that, a coffee filter or a clean kitchen towel that allows the ferment to breathe, a rubber band or canning lid to secure, a couple tablespoons of sugar, you can use measuring spoons if you want, and then a few bowls just to separate your peels from the flesh of the apple. We'll start off by giving the apples just a light rinse to get off any dirt. And then we're going to begin processing them. So start with your paring knife or your vegetable peeler and just get those skins off. And remember, we're using all of these, so keep them. Place those peels in a bowl along with the cores that you might have, and that's going to be in a separate bowl from the actual flesh of the apple if you end up using that. And you can certainly use the flesh of the apple in your apple cider. There's nothing wrong with that if you're making vinegar. It's just you might want to use it for something else. Place your cubed pieces of apple in a separate bowl for the apple butter. And I can't say this enough, we're making small batch apple cider, but if you want a really big apple cider batch and you want that to last you through the year, go ahead and save all of your apple peels and all of your cores and make one huge tub of it because it's so amazing to make your own vinegar at home. So I'm just going to finish up really quick peeling these and cutting the cores into little pieces as well. And here's demonstrating using a paring knife if you don't have a peeler at home. It's a little bit more difficult, but it's not a huge problem. Okay, let's slow things down a little bit. So we're going to put the apple scraps into our jar, and I like to use a canning funnel just because it's easier, especially when I want to cram as much apple in there as possible. And you'll see why this is helpful. If you don't have one, no big deal. You want to squish the apples down as much as possible to really fill that jar so that all of your water is coming into contact with the apples. At this point, you might want to use your wooden spoon or whatever tool that you have to really push those down, like this. Now to make the solution. So I've got a cup of water, and it's warm water. It's not boiling. It's pretty hot though. And I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons of sugar, and I'm going to stir that until the sugar is dissolved. So this is our solution. And we're going to have to use more water on top, but this is just a way that I can get all that sugar melted. The important next step here is to make sure the apples are fully covered, but you're leaving a bit of room at the top of the jar. So that's just room temp water to finish out. You want all the apples to be submerged in the solution, so I'm pushing them down. This part is totally optional. You can add in a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and this kind of just inoculates our culture with the bacteria that are already in raw apple cider vinegar. It's only going to work if it's the raw kind with the mother. Now we're going to cover it with a breathable cloth napkin. Here's an example. You can also use like a fine mesh sieve or something like that. You don't want fruit flies to get in. That's the important piece. And I'm using some, tightly woven cheesecloth. In order to secure it, you can use a rubber band. That works just fine. Or if it's a thin piece of fabric, a canning lid over the top. So we want this to breathe. It needs to breathe. Store it in a dark place for 2 weeks, out of direct sunlight. Okay, so here are a few important notes when we're doing this. One is that every single day for 2 weeks, I stir the apples or push them below the solution. It's not going to be horrible if you don't get to it that day, but make sure to get to it the next. So I'm kind of just like moving things around and making sure there's no browning apples on top for mold to grow on. Again, it's best to store this in a dark place, so make sure to do that. So the process this all happens by is basically we're using bacteria and yeast to convert sugars to alcohol. You might smell that. And then the alcohol will turn to vinegar when it has no sugar left. So after 2 weeks, we'll strain the apples out. It should smell like vinegar. During especially the beginning of that 2-week period, you'll see a lot of bubbling and action happening. And the bubbling is normal. It just means that yeast and bacteria are turning the sugar into alcohol. And once that stops, we know it's time to strain. So here's how we'll do it. So you can use cheesecloth or a fine mesh strainer. You want to get the small particles out. I'm going to strain all the apples into this strainer. So remove the lid, pour everything out into there, and then we're going to sort of smush it as much as we can with a wooden spoon to get all of that vinegar out. So just be gentle doing this process, but try to get as much as you can. You can pour your strained vinegar into another clean jar, and the next step is we're going to cover it again just like we did, but this time no apples in there, and we're going to let it sit for an additional 2 to 6 weeks, really as long as you'd like. It depends on how strong and pungent you want your vinegar. So it's going to stay in a dark place again. So if you like a light vinegar, you can pull it out after 2 weeks. At some point, you're going to want to take it out, bottle it, put it in your fridge, and you can use it for up to a year. If you check the video description, you'll find some recipes using apple cider vinegar. And up next is a recipe of using our apple flesh to make apple butter. So this is also a really simple, easy folk method of making apple butter. We're going to use all of the flesh from the 5 or 6 apples we use for our apple cider vinegar. Those are nicely cubed. We're going to add in about a half cup of water, about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I use 2 tablespoons of sugar. You could use up to a 1/4 cup. I don't think it needs that much sugar to be good though. And go ahead and give that a good mix to incorporate all of the ingredients. So those apple pieces are going to go in a large saucepan along with the water, granulated sugar, and lemon juice, and we're going to bring it to a boil on medium-high heat. Then, once it's at a boil, reduce the heat to medium-low. Cover and cook those apples for 20 to 25 minutes until they're beginning to soften and fall apart. Once those apples fall apart, you can add brown sugar to taste along with your spices and salt. So we're going to gently simmer this, stirring regularly to avoid spattering until the apple butter is a deep caramel in color and thick enough to hold its shape on a spoon. I added about a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, a pinch of cloves, and some sea salt. Add whatever your favorite winter warming spices are. Don't forget to stir to incorporate everything. And what you're looking for is this deep caramel color. So here's what it's going to look like. At this point, you know it's time that you can jar it up. So I like to let it cool for a bit before I put it into jars. You want a tight seal, and it can be refrigerated for really up to 3 weeks or so. I love spreading it over toast in the morning or using it in marinades. It's pretty yummy. Now, if you want a smoother puree than this, because mine's still a little chunky, you can certainly run it through a blender or something like that. But I kind of like when it has chunks. Apples have natural pectin, so as it cools, it'll be easier to spread. It'll stay together a little bit better. Okay, folks, well, we hope you enjoyed this video of apple cider vinegar making and apple butter. Don't forget to like and subscribe and reach out with any questions or concerns. My email is brooke@justroots.org. Take care.